Hello everyone, how's it going? It is Tyrnor as always, and I'm here to bring you another top whatever list, and this time it is the top 9 cities. Now I know I haven't done a top whatever list in a while, and that's for two reasons. First and foremost, a lack of time. And second of all, I wanted to move away a bit from character focused top 10s. For example, I just did top 10 characters. And talk a bit more about abstract things, such as cities in this particular case. One thing to mention is that this list is not based mostly on how the city is in game, so to say. I'm not picking, for example, Orgrimmar over Thunderbluff because more players hang out in Orgrimmar, or because Orgrimmar has a nicer looking auction house. I'm judging mostly on their lore. Maybe I'll make a comment or two about their aesthetic, but it'll be at the very least 90% lore based, let's say. Oh, and before we go in, shout out to Lor'themar City, what I think is the crappiest city in World of Warcraft. Basically, the old Horde occupied some Dark Iron Dwarf ruins in Blackrock Mountain and put some tents there. Hooray. Anyway, here's number 9. Number 9 on my list is Dalaran. Dalaran is pretty much synonymous with mage lore, and I am a mage in game, so go figure. I like Dalaran's story with its early history of it being a community of the early human mages who had to get the assistance of the High Elves in order to combat demons, the Council of Tyrsgard and all that, to its latest history from the First and Second Wars onwards. I like how mysterious Dalaran is supposed to be in the lore, with countless secrets and machinations at every corner, which isn't really reflected that well in game, to be honest. And I especially like the interaction of certain characters, namely Medivh, Khadgar, Kel'thuzad and Jaina, with Dalaran's leadership. The Council of Six, both past and present, also have very interesting power dynamics, and I just like most of the characters who sat on the council. I also like certain aspects of Dalaran in Legion, namely how it seems to be pretty perfect and well ordered on the surface, but its outskirts and its underbelly are filled with criminals, corrupt guards, and even sometimes demons. It's also kinda shown in the mage and rogue order halls in their campaigns, with how the mage gets to be the leader of an elite group of mages with fancy headquarters, a gigantic library, while the rogues hang out in the sewers and basically pretend to be the Illuminati. Number 8 on my list is Stratholme. Stratholme was supposed to be the economic heart of Lor'themar before its destruction, with much of the industry of the kingdom being focused there, while Capital City remained more of an administrative and religious center. Many notable lore events also happened in this city, namely Alonce's Fowl creating the Knights of the Silver Hand, the trial of Tyrion Forging for helping the orc Eitrigg, and of course its infamous purge. Stratholme is also one of the most well-known and notable parts of Arthas' story, and I especially like what became of it following the Purge, namely the largest Scourge stronghold, with the exception of Naxxramas and possibly Scholomance in the Eastern Kingdoms, and the various quests that sent you there in Vanilla and Burning Crusade. I also like that it became one of the strongest outposts of the Scarlet Crusade, garrisoned by its most elite troops, with its secret leader Balnazar in as well, and how these crusaders eventually became the Risen Undead. Incidentally, I also found Baron Riven there to be pretty cool. So yeah, Stratholme. Number 7 on my list is Suramar. Here's where what I mentioned previously about the in-game stuff not really applying comes in. I'm not going to talk about the Suramar and the Nightfallen in-game mechanics since 1. They're not why Suramar is on this list or even what this list is about, and 2. I don't even know what to say about them that hasn't been already said. Regardless, I really like the storyline of Suramar, both the city and the zone, and by extension of the Nightborn Elves. The characters are also fairly interesting, all things considered. I'm especially a fan of Valtra myself, and I like the political machinations going on and the Nightwell and Arkwine. And I have to say that Suramar is probably the most aesthetically beautiful city, both in the game and in lore, possibly surpassed only by Zinajari or Argus before its corruption. Number 6 on my list is Zul Aman. It's no secret that I'm a fan of trolls. In fact, they're my favorite race overall. And the Amani trolls are, kind of interchangeably with the Zandalari, my favorite kind of trolls. I'm a big fan of the ancient Amani Empire and their conflicts with the elves and the humans, and of the trolls overall during the Second War. Zul'jin is one of my favorites, in fact. What really pushed Zul Aman this high, however, was what we learned of the origins of the city in the Warcraft Chronicle. In short, a servant of the old gods, a faceless general, started the ancient wars between the trolls and the insectoid Akir. After a long, brutal conflict, the trolls succeeded in breaking the power of the Akir and split up in order to hunt the insectoids down. One tribe followed the Kaphraxi, the faceless general himself, as he retreated to the northeast, and eventually, following a gigantic battle, the tribe succeeded in slaying the beast with immense casualties. These trolls then decided to found their settlement and empire over the corpse of the Kaphraxi, and this was the beginning of Zul Aman. Which overall is, I think, a really badass story and the main reason I ranked Zul Aman this high. Number 5 on my list is Ulduar. Ulduar has actually been specifically called not a city several times in the lore, and on other times it has been called an actual city. So under this very loose definition, I'm fitting it on my list. If you disagree, feel free to consider that this entry does not exist and move everything before up by one spot. If it is a city, then I definitely have to say that Ulduar is the coolest city with all the Ironforge and the machinery around. I really like the Titan and Ironforge lore in World of Warcraft, and Ulduar is pretty much their capital on Azeroth. I really like the storylines that have taken place in or around Ulduar, pretty much everything from the imprisonment of Yogg-Saron, the Curse of Flesh, the betrayal of Loken, the Earthen Resistance, the creation of the Iron Army, and so on and so forth up to modern times. I like pretty much all of the keepers of Ulduar, especially Loken and Mimiron, and I also really like the Storm Peaks and the various machinery found in the zone, which is an extension of the Ulduar complex. It also helps that Yogg-Saron is my favorite old god. What's there not to like? Number 4 on my list is Shattrath City. Shattrath was actually lower on this list, probably around number 11 or 12, until I really thought about it and its backstory and gradually moved it up. I like Shattrath because it embodies, in a way, the beacon of hope for Outland and for Draenor when the orcs were fighting the Draenei. Shattrath was the capital of Draenei society. While it stood, the Draenei had a solid refuge, and after the destruction of Draenor, the Naaru reclaimed Shattrath and turned it into a place of hope, where everyone is welcome and safe. Even when you talk to Adol in the Terrace of Light, the gist of what he says is that light envelops and comforts you, you are safe in Shattrath City. I obviously also like the backstory of Shattrath, with the sacrifice of the majority of the Draenei population in order to save the rest of their kind from the Horde, possibly one of the greatest moments in Warcraft's lore. And I like the storyline of the Scryers mainly, and the Aldor, and their respective conflict and how they still manage to work together, under the guidance of the Naaru to topple Il'dan and later to restore the Sunwell. I also like the lower city of Shattrath, the gathering point of refugees basically, and how it became the hub for scammers, black market dealings and so on, even if the majority of the people living in the lower city are just refugees trying to survive. Number 3 and the first in-game capital of an actually playable race on this list is Ironforge. I've talked about Ironforge, the kingdom and the dwarves several times before. I really like the current political situation of the three dwarf clans and the Council of Three Hammers, and the political machinations afoot. I also really like the history of the dwarves, from how they wandered confused into Dunmorrow and constructed the city of Ironforge, to their development as a society, eventually splitting into 3 separate clans, and how the fragile truce between them was shattered with the death of their united king, and of course the subsequent war. I've also always been a fan of underground cities, or cities built in a mountain, such as Ironforge, and of the overall, albeit somewhat stereotypical, culture and economy of the dwarves in the city. along with the honorable mention of the Explorers League. So yeah, Ironforge. Number 2 on my list is Stormwind, the heart of the Alliance as I'd call it. I like the humans of Stormwind, in fact I'd say that it is my favorite human kingdom overall, and I like pretty much all members of the Rin dynasty. Obviously I like Stormwind's backstory, how it grew from an isolated and weak kingdom to a great power, to how it was toppled in the Orcish invasion, its restoration, the Defias fiasco, and so on and so forth. And I like how the city is built and structured architecturally. But what I like most is the resilience of the people of Stormwind overall. They were defeated by the Horde, but they came back alongside the Alliance and fought bravely for their land. They built a glorious city from scratch almost, they were attacked by Deathwing and fought back, and so on. They are the stubborn core of the Alliance, its heart like I mentioned above. And the city of Stormwind is overall a glorious, strong and firm place. I also really like its background music, especially the additions made in Cataclysm and in Legion, which epitomize this, I think. And number 1 is...
The past few years have seen unprecedented changes within the eternal land of Quel'Thalas. The Blood Elves, following the will of their crazed leader Kael'thas Sunstrider, channeled dangerous, chaotic magics to transform their sacred Sunwell into a gateway of unspeakable evil. While Kael'thas and his demonic masters were eventually defeated, a different kind of transformation occurred within the Sunwell itself, as a dying Naaru sacrificed its life essence to reignite the Sunwell into a fount of holy energy. Now, the Blood Elf regent Lor'themar sees a new hope on the horizon for his people. Over time, the Sunwell's light could cure the Blood Elves of their cursed state. But many still cling to the arcane powers they've procured, and are hesitant to relinquish them.
Number 1 on my list is Silvermoon City. I really love the Blood Elf backstory, which I've talked about before, and Silvermoon pretty much perfectly epitomizes their society. For thousands of years it stood as the greatest city in its corner of the world, as the High Elf Kingdom was at its peak. Then, after the Scourge invasion, half of it was rebuilt while the other half is still in ruins, which symbolizes in a way how weak Quel'Thalas really is after the Third War, despite how strong they want to seem. Really, Silvermoon is in a way a good example of appearances being deceiving, as it is a spectacular, opulent show of magic, despite the fact that for Burning Crusade at least, the Blood Elves were magic addicted and almost mana starved. Inside the beautiful buildings you had things like the Blood Knights draining Muru of power, for instance. I also like the leadership of Silvermoon, namely Lor'themar and his council, and how tenuous their grip on power was at the beginning at the very least. You can see several cases in Silvermoon of dissenters being silenced or mind-controlled. There was fairly widespread opposition among the Blood Elf society regarding the Blood Knights and their alliance with the Horde. Really, the Blood Elves of Silvermoon only came together as a people after Kael'thas raided the city and stole Muru. And yet, again, the city still has statues of Kael'thas everywhere, which is something which has been referenced in the lore. Still, the elves are nothing if not vainglorious, and they do their best to make Silvermoon City look incredibly beautiful, especially for a Horde city, while hiding its real vulnerabilities, and despite the fact that it can never really regain its past glory. And I think all this makes Silvermoon to be the most interesting city, in my opinion. And this brings us to the end of another top whatever list. Leave any thoughts in the comments below, and I would like to hear also what your favorite cities are. Not necessarily in-game capital cities, not necessarily in-game cities, just lore cities in general, like I kinda did. So yeah, I'll see you all next time, and farewell.